in the cockpit of a Global 6000 here at Rocky Mountain Metro Airport. This is my home airport. I've got an office here, but I've got my commercial out of this airport and my multi-com add-on. So I did my multi here too. It's a great airport, towered airport, which is really nice. But this cockpit here we have access to today, and I thought it would be really cool for, and very appropriate, right? This is the chick in a cockpit, but today we're going to call this Chicks in a Cockpit, and we are literally in a cockpit, which I think is pretty fantastic. So, Erika, I figured, we feel right at home here. I don't know how you feel about being in the right seat, but I'm never in the left seat of a jet, so I figured, we're going to try it out. It fits pretty good. I think this airplane likes me. And we're tapped into the audio panel here, so you hear a little bit of ground control in the background, which is kind of normal for two pilots in the cockpit, right? You're talking, whether it's going over checklists or whatnot, but you always have to hear your tail number.
Yes.
You got to be listening constantly. And if you've got an inexperienced person up front with you, you always have to do this, right? Hold on, quit talking. I need to hear this person. So anyways, so I thought it would be kind of fun to, I know that this is not a normal cockpit, you're not typed in the Global 6000. And for those of you that aren't aware, for these business jets, for a lot of the larger jets, right, I think it's above 12.5, you have to have a type rating.
Yes.
And people don't really realize that a lot of times is you have to go to a school that's specific for the airplane make and model. And so it's like if you drove a, Ford Expedition versus a Honda Civic, right? You would have to go to school for the specific model. So we're in a Global 6000. I think the type rating school for this airplane is probably about 3.5 weeks for this kind of a cockpit. But this is very modern, really beautiful electronic screens here, not like the old steam gauges that we grew up on. And this airplane can go all over the world. So some of the things that we're looking at here, obviously we got the throttle quadrants here, but most people don't know what we're looking at here. And in fact, it looks really intimidating.
Right.
And we had a tough time finding the volume on ground control because the radios are actually up here, but we can control them down here. But that's why you go to school.
Right.
And then it becomes second nature. And so I was just going to walk through some of this stuff because you have far more, let's be clear, I have 0 jet time. You have far more jet time than I do. But one of the major components of a business jet, and any jet really, is the FMS, the Flight Management System. And I'm assuming that this is the FMS.
It is, yeah.
And so how would you use an FMS in any airplane or this one?
Yeah, I mean they're all set up differently, but the concept is still the same. And actually, while I'm sitting here, I love that the airplane can now communicate much better to the pilot.
Right.
We were kind of laughing before we started here because we were talking about glass cockpits, and I'd been flying business aviation with the latest and greatest technology, and then I got hired at the airlines. And the first airplane I jumped into, I got hired as a flight engineer at on the 727, and everything's analog. And I mean, we're trying to navigate with the Trimble GPS, and it's just amazing how much farther ahead business aviation has always been in the technology. But they always, whatever aircraft it is, they always try to lay it out in kind of a flow.
Yeah,
and,
right.
And the systems flow, so your fuel, your all your pressurization is in the same area. That's like the cool thing. I'm a Boeing babe, so the Boeing aircraft are all laid out the same. The fuel, the pressurization, hydraulics, everything is laid out the same. So when I was on the 727, I would actually help out in the sim support. I could jump in the 747, the 737, and it was seamless because you just add an extra throttle or take away a throttle, and the systems were all laid out the same, and I love the flow of it. So,
right.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, after a few hours, you can almost close your eyes and touch everything. You know where everything is. So when you're first learning, this is what you do. You sit here and
Figure out flows,
and
right?
you
They talk
just
about
look.
flows all the
Yes,
time.
yes, exactly. So yeah, you even do that before you get in the simulator. They want you to know exactly basically where all the buttons are, so you know where to go. And so when you're running checklists all the time, you're not having to scramble to try to find the button you're looking for. So
So when they get type rated in an airplane like this, since we're talking about it, there's actually a lot of book work, and the systems of the airplane, right? The engines are way back there, and the landing gear is way back there, except for the nose gear, which is under us. But um, there's so much book work that goes into this, and flying in and of itself isn't terribly difficult, right? But when things go wrong, when the master caution goes off or the master warning goes off, that's when you really need to be ready to go, and it needs to be automatic, right? You've got O2 masks over here if you had a depressurization or smoke or anything like that. And I always tell people that are, flying, wow, you're a pilot. That's really awesome. That's a huge accomplishment. And it certainly is. And what I tell people is flying is actually it's really fun. Right? We have a blast doing it. But I'd say 85% of your training is really dealing with emergencies and making sure that things that you should be doing are really automatic. The things that happen immediately, like dead foot, dead engine, like you need to know how to troubleshoot very quickly and then go to your checklist, right? But talk about the emergency training that you've gone through in jets, and how you use this to figure out what's going on everywhere else in the airplane.
the simulators are absolutely amazing. You really do forget. I mean, I walk out of there, my pits are all stinky, and I'm just sweating, and
Sounds glamorous.
it is so glamorous. And actually, it's so funny because every time you walk in, pay attention when you walk in the simulator. You can smell the stress and the fear. So
There's like pheromones in stress, right?
it
You can
is.
smell it.
It totally is. And so they get better every single year. So, but this is what I try to bring out to the workshops I do across the country is, we're in the simulator. We have a certain set of things we're always going to train for, right? We're going to do engine cuts at takeoff and all those things like the worst case scenarios. But I've found in the real world, when you have an emergency, it doesn't go the way the checklist says it's going to. So I always try to bring a little extra layer of training, and especially on the systems training, because you're saying how you need to know that system. See, I don't really care if you know how it works. I want to know if you know how it fails. And
Right,
when it fails, what else does it take down with it?
right.
Right? And so there's so many variables that we can never train for. So you really need to train somebody on judgment making
Yeah,
rather than, because we're going to do all that muscle memory stuff. That's what we do in the sims every 6 months or a year, depending on what seat you're in or what airplane. That's why we do it. And pilots, we're just over and over and over again, but that's what you're doing so that in that moment of startle, because we all have it,
yep,
you have to go rely on those things that you have a synapse laid down for, right?
yep,
So got to be able to get there. But the extra training is okay. It doesn't fail the way it's supposed to, right? Things sometimes fail in between.
right.
Like a fuel control unit maybe doesn't just quit working; it works like halfway, right? So then you have to. That's when you are a real pilot, right?
Yeah.
Now you're above and beyond the checklist, and you're thinking beyond that. And so having a good systems knowledge is like the key to everything. So
And it's a lot of systems on these airplanes that can fail and can go wrong. And they've got some nice, displays here so you can see where the indicator is. But a lot of times, yeah, it's not textbook.
yeah,
I think
right.
a lot of times we got to realize they're not going to teach you every scenario in school. That's where your systems knowledge and experience and whatnot comes into play. So now you've been in the right seat as a co-pilot in whatever airplane that airline or business aviation. What does it take to get from that seat to this seat?
A whole change in attitude.
Are you
uh,
throwing bags anymore? Are you emptying the lab? This is glamorous work, right?
you're still doing all that in business aviation. But I tell you what, business aviation is more like being a pilot, though. Man, I mean, every day is so different, right? At the airlines, you're going to the same major airports all the time. You have a full structure of, airport facilities and a whole entire crew of people, helping you. But when you're in business aviation, a lot of times once you launch from your home airport, you're on your own.
Right.
It's
Yeah, you're doing everything.
you are.
Yeah.
Yep, you're trying to round up catering and some weird requests out there. Man, I could tell you some stories.
Yeah.
But it's a double-edged sword. It's so much more challenging, but it's so much more challenging. Um, it does take a little different personality type that wants to stay in business aviation, and also your ability to communicate with your passengers. Because
Yeah.
at the airline world, man, I shut the door and that's the end of
Well,
you guys.
yeah, flight attendants have it back there.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. I did, that's one thing everyone has their little quirks in what they do, but I always made sure before I shut the cockpit door at the airlines, I would always quick look back at all those rows of people down there. And that was, we always talk about situational awareness, right? How easy it is to lose it, but that was my moment where I would look back there and see all those faces, and it would just make me elevate my responsibilities for what I was going to
Yeah.
do until I landed again.
Big
So
responsibility.
it is, but once that door shut, then we're up here and
You get to work.
we get to work. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's very cool. So getting to this seat though, what sort of experience are you required to have to go from that seat to this seat?
And I think you brushed on it before. The insurance companies often set what
Right.
kind of flight time they want. In an aircraft like this, man, you're looking at least realistically 5,000 hours to be a captain on one of these,
Right.
and that's what you see in the industry. Insurance companies probably don't require that high, but across the board, you're looking at about that much time. You want that variety of experience before you put somebody over there.
Yeah.
In the olden days, there really wasn't a lot of training to go from here to there, and it's a huge different whole mindset of operating with a first officer over here. So there are some courses out there to just make a little bit more self-awareness about your role as a captain.
Yeah.
A little more captain's training. The industry is doing a little better job of trying to get people to train on that specific role. But yeah, in an aircraft like this is the highest. This is a really high end.
Yeah.
Like when you're first getting your start in business aviation, when we talked about like King Airs, they still are looking at, they want you to have 1,500 hours in the right seat. But with networking,
Yeah.
there are those job openings in the right seat of turbine aircraft that are out there. You won't see them posted. It's word of mouth, so make sure you network out there. But
Yeah.
King Air captains, you're looking at maybe a couple thousand hours
Yep.
before you can get over there. So great opportunity, especially here in Colorado. We've got everything here, all the corporations, air ambulance, firefighting.
Sky jumping or
Yeah,
parachuting
Yeah,
thing. Yeah,
yeah,
just like
yeah.
skydiving.
Yeah,
Sorry, I was
yeah.
just like sky jumping. Not the
It
right word.
is, it
But
is.
yeah, because one of my friends got a lot of time in a King Air, and they just go up, down, up, down, up, down.
Lots
So
of landings.
lots of landings there too. So yeah, and you want to have the person in the seat to have those experiences, to have not every flight went perfect every time. You want the guy that's kind of seen a few things, and guy or gal, right? And all right, so one of the things that I think really sets apart like good captains from great captains, and this is something that they've incorporated into training and whatnot, is this CRM, cockpit resource management. But not only doing that, but really this person is not the authority, right? A good captain is going to solicit input from all the other crew members. In other words, they don't put themselves above everyone. They put themselves in a position where they utilize all of their resources and to have the best possible outcome from a situation. And so I do find that the person in this seat, right, is really good at communication, is good at soliciting input from others, and we saw this with Sully. And we've seen this, I mean, ever since I think it was in the 80s where the Sioux City, Iowa crash, where that captain, where it was Denny Fitch, and I'm drawing a blank on the captain's name right now. But, he really utilized all of his resources. And it was this mindset that, like, this person in this seat doesn't mean that everybody needs to listen to you. It means that they're good at soliciting input from all of their resources. And those resources can even be on the ground.
Absolutely. That's a great summary of it. And, when I first got hired at the airlines, because I didn't get to fly, it was like really sad. I mean, because I'm sitting back there as a flight engineer, but I tell you what, I got to see that CRM in action in so many different varieties. It was such a revelation to watch crews that work really well together. So you just described a good captain. That's not most captains,
Right. Yeah.
But so even during emergencies, watching how much better the whole entire process goes when you have that. I mean, we're still talking about somebody with authority, right? And they
Right.
make that final
Right.
decision. But
Right.
man, I tell you what, they never think they know it all. Those are the best captains. They maybe even if they do know it all, they don't act that way, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
yeah.
And at some point, somebody has to make the final decision. But at the same time, I think a great captain is one that just taps into all the resources. Because in the case of the Sioux City, Iowa crash, they really said like nobody should have survived that. But they did because they utilized all of their resources and the best possible outcome to a terrible situation. So, all right, so we have a lot of technology in this airplane. In fact, there's some really cool pieces of technology that are optional on this airplane that not every airplane has. So, part of flying, whether it be commercial or business aviation, is flying in inclement weather. Here in Colorado, we get snow, we get rain, and oftentimes, if you're in the rain here, you get icing. Um, Taking it down to minimums, meaning the lowest possible altitude that we can fly the airplane before. If we don't see the airport, we have to do a missed approach. We don't get that a whole lot here. But in other parts of the country, like Minnesota, you get it all the time. So some of the technology on this airplane allows you to be in an environment not like the 50s or 40s when we were talking to the captain on this airplane earlier, and he's just like, yeah, I flew in Africa. We had a compass and a stopwatch, and like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? You're descending down through clouds like that. But talk a little bit about the technology, maybe not specific to this airplane, that's available to you for instrument flying.
Yeah, I love all the stuff that's coming out that I'm seeing. Like we were just saying, the heads-up display that's an option on here. And the really cool thing is that the entire world is mapped now. The surface of the Earth is mostly mapped. So when I look at the future, maybe what this is going to look like for the people just now learning how to fly, I think what we're going to start seeing is maybe not a need for an instrument rating because you will be able to put
Can see.
you can see.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you still got to teach that because it's going to fail, right?
Yes.
So you still, and I still remember my very first IFR flight, and I'm thinking, I heard about vertigo, what that looks like. I'm like, yeah, it's not going to happen to me. Holy crap! The first time I was in the clouds, it was terrifying because when you've got your foggles on, you can take a quick peek and look out there, right?
And know your level. Yeah, you're like, okay, I'm climbing, but my wings are level. I know exactly what you mean.
Yes, and the first day, and then it's so cool though. After you've done it enough, it is such a seamless transition. You just become one with the airplane, and you just have this instant ability to look outside and like, oh, we're going to the clouds, and you instantly go to your airplane, and you have to learn how to trust that airplane, right? Because you have to rely on everything it's telling you.
Yeah.
But there's so many things that are coming out, and look at that Cat 3 landing now abilities.
Crazy. Like that, basically, it'll almost land itself, or it does land itself. Yeah.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've got what is that? The assisted landing, auto land, right?
Auto land.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Which is amazing to me. Now it's not going to taxi you into the FBO or anything. It's an emergency, and you can push a button and it'll communicate that you have an emergency. So if somebody is flying with you, let's say I'm incapacitated, it'll get somebody on the ground safely, hopefully. But it's not to be used it's kind of like a Tesla car, right? It's not to be used frequently and go to sleep in your car. But so that is kind of the goal. But there's still a lot of older airplanes out there.
Yeah, the vast majority are. I still, everything. at any given day, you look at all the airplanes that are 50 years and older in the air. I mean, if we maintain our cars like we do airplanes, we'd still be driving Chevy Chevettes around. But truly, maintenance for aircraft is such a different world, and still tons of great aircraft with many hours and time on them.
Yeah. No, the maintenance intervals, like, every airplane is looked at least annually. These airplanes are looked at extensively on prescribed intervals. But yeah, flying in instrument weather, I would say this is much easier than, say, a 20 or 30-year-old airplane where you're still using, the crosshairs on an old instrument gauge ILS approach. So it is pretty amazing.
You had to do, maybe not, NDB approaches?
I did have to do NDB approaches. Yeah, I had to use NDB approaches. And was that the... no, it was the Loran. We had a Loran in our 182 when we had a 182. So I had some old equipment, but the precision and what we have available to us today. And what's interesting to me is I got my instrument rating in 2006.
Okay.
And then I just recently went back and got my commercial and then my multi-commercial. And what was interesting, because I don't fly instrument out here in Colorado too much because, again, ice or granite, which you don't want either. And everything is GPS now, right? And so all the approaches, I was used to flying ILS approaches, NDB approaches, VOR approaches, and I could do those easily on the steam gauges. Now I've got all this glass, and it does present a different set of challenges for somebody that's been flying for a long time. It is easier, but you have to know what you're looking at. You have to know how to identify if it loses a signal, right? And nowadays, flying internationally, you've got spoofing.
Yeah.
And how do you identify that? And spoofing is, for those of you that don't know, this is when nefarious people hijack the GPS signals. Thankfully, nothing like it's been identified, but something could happen if they don't know how to identify it and cross-reference, like, hey, this is somebody's telling our GPS something that's not true, right? But these are all challenges that we face in today's day and age with the advanced technology that we have.
A whole other skill set now that we're being asked of our up and coming. And so I know everybody complains about the next generation, but I tell you what, they're much more capable and able and willing to use this high-end technology and to have that. Well,
I'm getting there.
We know what we learn on, right? But the up and coming pilots, they're learning on glass cockpits. And us old folks, they'll say, well, what about the raw skills? Yes, we definitely still need to have that in there. But and I purposely have been talking to all of our international flight departments to gather information about the GPS jamming and the spoofing. The jamming is easy because it either works or it doesn't. It's the spoofing that is a concern because not knowing that it's a false signal. So yeah, it's amazing what adversaries can do. So and so we were laughing because I was looking at the old ADF button down here. I'm like, we're going to have to go back and put the old-fashioned equipment back in there for a backup just to have. So
yeah, it's actually, and I believe that's an option, ADF-1, ADF-2 on a lot of these business jets, but it's a reason to have backups, right, to some of this technology that we have. So, well, I really had a lot of fun having this conversation. Chicks in the cockpit. We're going to have to do this again, hopefully. And thanks for watching.